here's my song, my attempt to sing. And again, I apologize to those who actually can sing. What can make me whole again? Nothing but the blood of Jesus. What can wash away my sin? Nothing but the blood of Jesus. What can make me whole again? Nothing but the blood of Jesus. What can take away my sin? Nothing but the blood of Jesus. Okay, now let's see. Other than my singing, did somebody feel triggered by this? Somebody feel... See, I grew up in a Baptist church in the mountains of East Tennessee, little one-room building. We didn't even have a piano. Southern Baptist Church. Probably it's in the category of the far right, shall we say. Did anybody feel triggered by that? I thought for sure somebody would be triggered.
I'm being triggered by your question.
Could be. But I'm interested in the... Dave texted us a little gruesome. Well, we're going to talk about this. You know, Jack is on, and he's familiar with what it's like to be at the ashram in India with Sai Baba. And back in the year, I think the year was 1992, more or less, and I was there. And I knew that the truth was somehow in this thing called the Bible. And I had this huge Bible I carried around, and it was like 90 to 100 degrees day in and day out. Sand and concrete, and walking around with this thing. And I was carrying it around. I was wanting Baba to touch the thing and reveal it and have it be authentic, like what was really written in this thing. He wouldn't come near it for a long time. One day something happened, and I realized he was like, okay, I'll deal with this, but not in the way you think. And over a period of time, what happened was I was able to intuitively see higher, in some sense higher, at least for me, more clear definitions and understandings of what is contained in the whole work. So a couple of things I want to say. I don't believe the original name was Jesus. I don't believe the original birthday was December 25th. But I'm using that word because it does signify something that's profound in this world, had a very profound effect on the world. There was, at least for me, I'm not asking anyone to believe anything I say. I'll get to more of a kind of the purpose of what I'm working towards here as we go along. So to me, it represents a divine master, a great divine master. One of the teachers I like refers to him as the master of love. Now, in some way, we don't know, was there a historic Jesus or not? I presume there was, but it's possible there was not. But at any rate, he does represent a great kind of archetype in the human psyche as for each of us as so-called individuals and for the collective. So if we look at what happened today was these words kept going through my mind, and I kept thinking, no, this is why is this going on in my mind? I kept trying to kind of put it out and either stay with the stillness or stay with a song that I really like. That's not a song I particularly like. But it kept insisting on going on and on and on. And then I sat down to have a short meditation break and late in the day, and there was just this insistence that I offer to do this thing tonight. So here we are. So you want to break these words down from my viewpoint. And I'd like to have comments from other people. So if you want to jump in, just let's see. There's a raise hand function here somewhere. I think anyhow, you can raise your hands. It'll come up on the screen, I think, or you can just wave at me or whatever. If you want to jump in with a comment or question. I don't want to just do all the talking. I may turn it into a Southern Baptist revival here. Not likely, but.
Hey, Allan.
Yeah.
Well, you could, I feel like commenting on the very first lyrics there.
Okay, good.
What can make me whole again?
Yeah.
That seems like a central question in my life.
Yeah.
And it's like I forget about it, and somehow at some point I'm reminded of that question. Maybe just because I go to show up at meetings like this,
Yeah. Thank you. That's beautiful. Yeah. And it really is such a great question. It's fantastic. What can make me whole again?
Yeah.
It means I was once whole. I don't know, we could give various definitions for wholeness. It has to do with completeness. It has to do with a state of well-being or beyond. Maybe not just well-being, but actually a oneness and a feeling, a sense of perfection, of magnificence. What can make me whole again? And Sean's got a comment or a question. Sean is a cosmic guy. You'll have to unmute Sean.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yeah.
So, with that first lyric, aren't you already whole?
Of course.
Like,
Everybody is already whole, of course.
So,
and we're not.
We are, but we're not. Yes, in this reality.
Yeah. Both. That's why I love the way it's worded. What can make me whole again?
Okay.
See, these lines are great. It's such a beautiful opening. And the next phrase is nothing but the blood of Jesus. So, what is this blood? Is it talking about the physical blood from his body? I don't think so. It's 2,000 years ago. The blood's all dried up. So it's symbolic to almost every person who's going to hear this. There's symbology in this blood of Jesus. So just think about this blood. Anywhere in your body, little tiny prick and blood comes. Anywhere in your body, least little thing and blood comes. And the blood is red blood. It isn't like black people, you make a hole and blue blood comes out or yellow blood. It's all red blood. Everybody's blood is red. And the blood of Jesus, to me, this is talking about oneness It's highly symbolic of we're all one being, we're all one family. You know, if you do your DNA test, you can find out your blood lineage back where you originated from, your bloodline. We're all human, and there's one blood. So this oneness, this recognition of the familyness of all human beings. See, what he's saying is, what can make me whole again means I once was whole. And a big part of my teaching is about how, and based on my memory and my experience, I just happen to be blessed or cursed, or actually some combination of two, or remembering prior to my conception and birth. I remember the purity, the vastness, the perfection of spirit. It had qualities that when I came here, I was like, I started to kind of recognize what was going on when I was about the age of 3. And it was quite a shock. It was actually a very, very traumatic moment when I kind of, what the hell, how did I get here? What caused me to be in this dense, heavy body, this dense, dark atmosphere? How did and I actually concluded I'd been kidnapped from my true home, and that these creatures were hypnotizing me to think it was one of them. That was my experience at 3 years old, tremendously traumatic. I think everybody goes through some version of that. And then over a period of time, we get hypnotized. What I did at that moment was I took a very profound vow that I would never forget, and that I would find my way back. I thought that meant going back to my home planet, or whatever the hell I thought. So because of that vow, I was able to retain the memory, and I was able to recognize the process of hypnosis we go through, in which we take on a paradigm of conceptual identity. Now, a lot of spiritual people talk about ego, and I suppose it's the same that I'm talking about. But I don't know what ego means. I haven't read a definition that there's a lot of agreement on. So that's why I use this language, a paradigm or matrix or paradigm of conceptual identity. And then we take that to be who and what we are. Is that matrix of identity. So it's, that goes to what you were saying, Sean. So in that acceptance, and it comes about, for the most part, unconsciously, bit by bit. And I can go into that more depth in some other situation if it arises. I'm just going to highlight this now. What can make me whole again? What took us from wholeness, what convinced us of the truth of our conceptual identity, what convinced us of that was what? The collective thinking, the collective atmosphere we're born into. When every person in our world is unconsciously, in subtle ways, telling us that you were born, that you're a separate individual, and that you're going to die. There's a lot of power, a lot of conviction power in the way people treat children that is the hypnotic spell. What can make me whole again? Nothing but the blood of Jesus. Nothing but the blood of Jesus means that, in the way I'm interpreting it and the way I'm addressing it, is when we can come together like this in a format in which we support each other in remembering and refreshing the reality of our wholeness, our original wholeness. Because it was through that conviction, the interaction with others, when we were children, 2, 3, 4 years old, we were vulnerable beings, very, very vulnerable. And the thing that was most needed for us as 2, 3, 4-year-old children, what was most needed was safety. And when you're vulnerable, what do you want? What do you look for? You look for a way to protect yourself, a way to be safe. And slowly, I remember the first time thought came in the mind. And there was a somatic reaction to thought that, it wasn't like a thought about the thought. It was just this kind of being reaction to whatever that is not welcome here. Then over a period of time, there was a kind of recognition that that's how you negotiate living in this world, is through thought. Then I remember when the first concept came, and there was a bit of a, oh, wow, an actual concept. See, there was a kind of, it felt like a leap into greater freedom, but it didn't turn out to be exactly like that. And then there was a period of time, I was probably a teenager when this happened. I recognized that I had the capacity to generate concept. And so that felt like a deeper move into freedom, which not necessarily so, but that's how it kind of works. So because the power of the hypnotic spell that took us into the conviction of separation and that I'm an individual, that I was born, that I have a lifespan, I'm going to die, the whole matrix of identity, the power it has. And like I said, I could go a lot more into it, but I just hit the highlights. It has a power because it's an unexamined assumption by pretty much everyone in the world we grew up in. So it had a lot of power to hypnotize us, basically. Let's see. So I've got to... That's great. That's great, Dave. I hope everybody sees Dave's message there. Yeah, well, great in the sense that you recognize it now. Not so great in the moment. But thank you for that comment. I don't know if Dave's comment will be on the recording. It says, I can relate to your story. Around the same age, 3 years, I remember telling my mom that she was not my real mom, but had kidnapped me. I can imagine so. So she became very emotional, so I didn't want to hurt her. Basically, kept quiet. And that keeping quiet and kind of pulling back is another part of what children who do, because they realize how vulnerable they are and how much they need the parents to kind of nurture them alone, whether good parents or not. So the next line is, what can take away my sin? What is this sin? What does it mean, sin? Who can give us a definition of sin? What does it mean, sin? Has anybody really thought about it? Yeah.
Is it to miss the mark? Something along those?
That's one of the kind of original interpretations. You're missing the mark. I want to go into it a little more. So what I'm going to talk about here, then, let's use the word karma, because I think most people have some kind of understanding of karma. So here's one of the ways that I see karma as working. It's actually, to me, it's a very complex and precise science. And I don't think you can ever figure out all of the karmas that any person or group is dealing with. And there's many components of it. One particular I want to address is when we are living within the context of being a separate individual who undergoes birth, life, and death, and all the fears and emotions and confusions that come with that. We have fallen from grace. We have fallen from the Garden of Eden. We have fallen from wholeness. And I'm not saying this happened to us. That's not exactly what I'm saying, but there's that kind of gestalt that somehow we've lost our wholeness. So, when my dog was alive, I could tell him all day long his ears are too long, his nose is too big. I could say all kinds of things to him. You smell terrible, your ears are too long, how are you ever going to get a date? This is just no good. The dog would just, it never made him even slightly unhappy. All those things I said to him. But if you say the least thing to a human, why do we react? There has to be that prior condition of wholeness, of magnificence. If it's not there, deep inside us, or maybe not so deep, if it's not there, I don't think it would be possible to be so triggered by these things. There has to be some deep kind of hidden memory of our perfection. So, and the loss of that reality, to me, in my perspective, is what makes it so painful to be human. If we fully have our memory, and I'm not talking about memory like I did this in the past life or whatever. I'm talking about the original condition, the wholeness, the perfection, the being that we are, that we've always been, that we always will be, but we've lost it. There's a mythological reality that 99.999% of the humans agree upon, which is called death. I've got some good news and bad news for you. We're all going to go through that transition, and it's not true. There is no death. The only death, and then this is my perspective, I'm not asking you to believe it, the only death ever is when we forget our original nature, when we forget who we truly are, when we fall into the hypnosis of being a separate individual. And that is an act of suicide. Yes, for the most part, we do it unconsciously, but it's not forced upon you. It's not forced upon me. It's not forced upon anyone. It is an act of suicide. Unconsciously, yes. But what I am committed, what I work towards is when we don't do it anymore. To me, when we talk about moksha, when we talk about liberation, what I'm talking about is being able to enter the matrix of human existence, which, in my perspective, a human being, the human/earth being, is simply a frequency bandwidth. It's a frequency bandwidth. We just enter a frequency bandwidth. And in doing so, the shift from the frequency bandwidth of spirit into the frequency bandwidth of human is dissonant, and it results in a feeling of dissonance or a sense of shock to the spirit. And that's what makes us susceptible to the hypnotic spell of being separate. When Shirdi Sai Baba made this statement, let me see if I've stored my book somewhere and can't find it at the moment. And I'm going to botch the quote a little bit. Jack may remember this, and maybe you can straighten me out with it. But there was a man that came to see him once, For those of you who don't know, Shirdi Baba he was born around 1850. His birth was around 1850. He lived up until 1918, I think. But he was a great spiritual master, a great teacher. This man came there once who wanted Baba to give him the wisdom. And Baba said something like this. He said, I can't reveal the wisdom to you, but if you will understand this matrix of it, what I'm calling the matrix of identity, if you can understand the identification, the ego itself, then you can become free of it. And I based a lot of my work on that simple statement. To understand the structure of identity, how it came about and how it functions, how it works. Because if you have some sense of what it is and how it functions, that means you're stepping beyond it. To really understand something, you cannot fully understand something if you're immersed within it. So to understand it is to give you a little bit of space around it. And in that space is the connection with your a priori nature, your a priori reality. Yeah, so I want to move on into something here that I think will help. I still haven't really got to the main point here, why I wanted to do this. So I've done a casual study, a very small study of neuroscience and what the neuroscience is saying. And I really like this book by Bo Lotto. What's the name of it? I can't even think of the name of his book. It was one of those books I had to buy in actual form rather, because I knew I wanted to underline the stuff, and I'd underlined about half the book. It's a great book. So Bo, and remember what I said about human Earth is a spectrum of frequency. It's actually a very small range of frequency. So the human nervous system, the brain, the nervous system, the whole thing, gives us access to a very small slice of consciousness that I call brain consciousness. Now, not Bo, but another scientist said it this way: if you took all of the possibility of experience and stretched it out in a linear fashion, which you can't do, but if you did, and made it 100 miles long, what the human system accesses is 6 inches out of the 100 miles. Someone else said it's 1/10 trillion. So we're accessing 1/10 trillion. Now here's the thing that I found really important about what Bo said. There's a line in Sanskrit, one of the great little sentences from the Veda that says Yad Bhavam Tat Bhavati. Now that, you could say that means as you feel. Bhav it's not a thought. Bhav is deeper than thought. It's a feeling sense. As it feels, so is it. Now here's what the neuroscience says. Bo's research. This is actually research. I don't have any idea how they did it. This is what they concluded, is that what we experience, the information that comes in through our eyes, how much of it comes through our eyes? And most people will guess 50, 60%. What the scientist says is 10% of the information comes through our eyes, 90% the brain generates. So here's I mean, this is fantastic to me. This is so beautiful. It just really makes it very clear what these scriptural teachings have been telling us, is that we have taken on this. If you like the word ego, you can use the word ego. I prefer the conceptual matrix of identity. We've taken on this identity, which means that we've shrunk down our capacity to experience to a very, very small slice. And We are constantly, what? Interpreting our experience. Now, if you ask yourself the question, what would I experience if I directly experienced reality? What would my experience be? I don't think we know. I don't think we can say. So to me, the question is there a world outside me? Am I an individual living in a reality? Is there a world outside me? Any evidence that you have or can derive for a world outside you, where is that evidence happening? It's happening in your mind. It's happening in your consciousness. So we really can't say, from my perspective, I'm not here to argue this, it doesn't matter to me, but I want to get to something. So we are constantly interpreting. Now, how are we interpreting? How is the brain interpreting? So data comes in. There is some kind of data that the senses are picking up. And as that data sets up electrochemical impulses in the brain and nervous system, the brain runs an extremely complex high-speed algorithm and determines an experience. If you look at the sky and you say the sky is blue, not really, the sky's not really blue. If you look at you're wearing a blue shirt, oh, what am I wearing? A red shirt. You say it's a red shirt. There's no red in the shirt. The brain generates the color red according to the frequency of the light being reflected by the shirt. What if all of what we think of as reality in the world around us is like that? It's an interpretation. Now, the interpretation is done by an algorithm, which means everything we've experienced up till now, not just what we've experienced, but what the people around us experienced, what our ancestors experienced, how they interpreted reality. And according to neuroscience, the primary function of the brain is to avoid uncertainty. The whole thing was avoid uncertainty. You know, some people, a few hundred years ago, one guy might have stopped and thought, well, that's a really interesting cat. I wonder if it's dangerous. You know what? He didn't go into the DNA pool. He had lunch with a tiger. So there had to be this instantaneous reaction to anything that's not familiar. Anything that's not, if there's anything where there's uncertainty, you avoid that. This is principle of the brain consciousness, to avoid uncertainty. And we are always interpreting reality. We're not experiencing reality directly. And our interpretation is always colored by avoiding uncertainty. There's a lot more to it than that. There's about 12 biases of the brain. I haven't studied them all. And we could talk about more of those. But you can begin to see that every human you meet has a unique interpretation of the world. And it's colored by this factor, avoid uncertainty. And it's colored by everything they've experienced up till that moment. They even go so far, I've even read in some book somewhere that whatever, like my shirt is red, tomorrow the color will not be the same. And I'm not talking about fading, I'm just talking about the fact that the light that's coming to the planet tomorrow will be a little bit different. So the same, it's not going to be the same precise color because it's going to be different tomorrow. Different light's coming as being reflected differently. And so the interpretive mechanism is always drifting. It's always shifting moment to moment because we're always taking a new experience. Now, what this means fundamentally, what I want to emphasize here is that those of us who are highly entrenched, let's say in the, I'd rather not name names, but we kind of need to get to something important here, is that there's a huge evangelical support to the president, which for most of us seems kind of like, wow, how is that happening? How is that possible? But here's the point. Each of those people is simply being subject to the interpretive mechanisms of the brain. And that has a lot to do with the collective thought patterns, the collective beliefs, the collective disbeliefs, the collective fears, which is constantly influencing everyone else. And along with that, there is a component of our conceptual matrix of identity which would give us the conviction that I am a separate individual person. I'm a person, a separate individual person. I was born, I have a lifespan, and I will die. In my experience, that is not true. There simply is no separate individual. That's an illusion of the brain consciousness in the presence of the collective thought. So I have practiced what's called self-inquiry for many years, starting around 1992. Due to the grace of Sai Baba, I went through a very sudden and dramatic shift in which my whole sense of self just dissipated. It just did not exist anymore. I had no sense of an individual person at all. But when it kind of came back enough for me to be human again, I began a process of self-inquiry as best as I could based on the teaching of Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta. That went on for about 10 years, approximately. And then a few years ago, at that point, it kind of played out. There just was no more traction there anymore. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, I was kind of guided back into that, but in a different and a more nuanced and a little bit more clarified way. And since then, a lot of this sense of self has become more clarified for me. So I'm not just speaking from something I read or heard. I'm speaking based on my experience. That what I am, in the highest sense, what I am is the perfection before there was any existence, before there was any creation. What I am at the highest level is that. But then there's all the strata in between, right up to the identity, right up to the human identity. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with human identity. It's a great thing. But here's the problem with human identity. When a great actor goes to create a movie or perform on Broadway, and you go see the show, you don't want an actor who's like reading his lines and saying, well, this is not real, but here's the script. You wouldn't watch it. You wouldn't pay a penny to see the guy. You want the actor to perform like he is absolutely that person, whether he's a murderer or a saint or a prostitute or a businessman. You want him to play that role with absolute conviction. The problem is that the actor goes home at night and he forgets he's taken on the role. Then we got a problem. So I relish the fact that I have a particular identity. I have a particular role to play. I am Allan, not a problem. When I go into my room and sit and close my eyes, I'm not Allan anymore. I just put him aside. It's the way an actor goes home at night. He's no longer the part he's playing. He puts that aside, goes and plays with his grandchildren. At least I do. So the evangelical Trump supporter is as innocent as Marianne Williamson. They're equally innocent. And they're equally, I naturally, I'll admit it, I very much prefer Marianne to any other politician I've seen step forward so far. I love this woman. I love what she represents. But she has her matrix of identity, and she has her level of consciousness, her degree of how much consciousness she's bringing to the performance, the part that she has in the play. Then there's the matrix of identity of Trump and his supporters. How much consciousness are they bringing? And how trapped are they in the matrix of identity? The thing that has just been glaringly present for me the last few days is every moment is an iteration of my existence. Every instant is an iteration of my existence. My existence shifts. My existence. My original existence is infinite. It is absolute. It is infinite. To my existence, there's no birth, there's no death. And in this moment, my existence includes all the people here, includes my talking, includes my feelings, my emotions. And in the next instance, something will shift on the screen, and there's a new iteration of my existence that arises. How many iterations of my existence are possible? Infinite, infinite, infinite. There's no end to the possibilities of iterations of my existence. And you must have noticed, and I know Ade has a couple of young children. I don't know if anyone else knows. Kara has a daughter. Sean had a young daughter. So you must have noticed, and those of you who have children, it's a little more poignant for those of you who don't. You have friends, you have parents, you have siblings. You must have noticed that when you're with your child, you're a particular person. When you're with your boss, you're a different person. When you're with your brother or your sister or your parent, you're a different person. It's an iteration of your existence. It's an instant. And what you are, what I am, is not an individual. We are, in some sense, a community. We are, in some sense, a complexity. You know, I love to see that. It just maddens me sometimes. I see this tiny little insect. He's so small. How much intelligence, how much precision, how much magnificence is in this little insect. And every day I see one I don't remember ever seeing before. There's some little bee. I was having dinner outside. There's some little bees, not even an inch long, maybe an inch long, maybe 3/4 of an inch. And he could just move like that in any direction. It was like so mysterious and so magnificent. The precision, the magnificence, the intelligence that's in each little piece. Some people say that a single cell of our body is more complex than the city of Tokyo. So look at the magnificence of everything that exists here. And then ask yourself, how can my spirit be any less than that? Is it possible that my spirit is less complex, is less intelligent? I don't think so. How could it be? What we call spirit is immense. It is vastly intelligent, and it is supremely precise. And there's a lot of kind of, when I hear a lot of spiritual teachings, there's a kind of like, you'd think that spirit is some sort of amorphous blah. It's not. I mean, if for somehow that nourishes you to believe that, I'm not here to persuade you differently. But I have been blessed to have enough, let's say, journeys and explorations and experiences in spirit to tell you it is not like that. It is immensely rich, immensely vast. At the higher level of your spirit, that 100-mile possibility is there for you. It is there for every person. There's a big stink going on, and I find it horrifying. These people who are held in detention centers at the Mexican-U.S. border. Not just there, but many places on the planet, these things are going on. The truth of it, from my perspective, 99.99% approximately of all humans are in detention centers at the border. 100% of human beings are immigrants. Well, could be wrong, but that's how I see it. Again, I'm not here to sell you anything or convince you of anything, just share my perspective. And hopefully, in sharing the perspective, it will expand your possibility a little bit. 100% of human beings are immigrants, and 99.9% have found themselves locked up in a detention center at the border between perfection and human. We have perfection prior to human, and we have the potential perfection in human. The odd part is that all those people who are in the detention center have the key to unlock the gate in their hand. Nobody can do that, can unlock that door for you. It's up to you. Because you are the majesty of God. So, supposedly at some point, God created reality. God created the world. He created us, supposedly. I'm not trying to convince you, but we've heard that so many times that it's certainly something that most people have some sort of belief or disbelief. To me, those who say I believe, those who say I don't believe, it's the same thing. To me, it's not about belief and disbelief, it's about experience. What kind of understanding has your experience revealed? Otherwise, I have no particularly stake in believing or disbelieving. And if anything, I hope I can perhaps inspire a little more sincerity in you about the quest. And this quest for spiritual maturity, it's not for you. It's not for me. It's for the collective. And that's why I really like this little song. What can make me whole again? Nothing but the blood of Jesus. The only thing that can make us whole is the entirety of the human race being awake to the truth of who they are. And that's what we're working towards. That's what we are doing. That's what's happening. From my perspective, there's no if about it. It's a done deal. I would say it seems like there's a matter of how efficiently and how quickly do we make that leap. Not if. But the more there's a sincerity, and the people used to ask Nisargadatta all these things about, what about this practice? What about this meditation? And he would come back to one thing, is that sincerity of purpose. The greatest ally is your sincerity of purpose. Let's see, how are we doing on time? We've got a few minutes left. I think what I would like to do now, so the prevalence of a kind of divide between the so-called liberals and the left wing and right wing. It took me a long time to figure out what that means. I've only figured it out pretty recently. But it's become a little more pronounced now, which I don't really see that conflict as being, other than the unfolding of the new earth and the new human. I just see it as that's how it's unfolding. In me, there's no possibility of anything other than that happening. I don't allow any. Every now and then, a little fear of doubt tries to creep in, and I pretty quickly just kind of, it's like cleaning the kitchen table, which I don't necessarily do every day, but like vacuuming and cleaning, just kind of take it out of the space of myself. So wherever there's resistance, so if you have, and I have some really sweet and dear friends who are hardcore Trump supporters, and I let them know I'm not a Trump guy, but I don't allow that to enter into the equation of the love and respect we have for each other. And I don't allow myself, as much as possible, I don't allow myself to entertain fear about any of these things. I'm not saying I'm perfect with it, but the fear is, it's not what's happening, it's the fear in our being. It's giving permission for fear to be and that's not so easy, I recognize that. That's part of the healing work that I do in my teaching. But I think let's do something like a practice. And just let's just close our eyes and bring make presence within yourself, whoever you think is how to say this, like whoever you think may be opposing your political views, opposing any of your views. Just presence them. And notice that you're not experiencing the person directly. What you're experiencing is an interpretation that you have of that person and their predicament. And that the resistance you have, any feeling of antagonism, resistance, anger, any resistance like that you have towards that person actually gives them more power over you. It increases, shall we say, the stubbornness of their reality. And see if you can simply see that person or people as a portion of yourself. They're not really different. There's some difference, yes. There's some uniqueness in each person. But that uniqueness is grounded in their lifetime, all the people around them, their ancestry, their bloodline, their history, their interpretation. So they have their interpretive mechanism, you have your interpretive mechanism. It's an accumulative interpretive mechanism. And see to what extent you can give them free, just let them be free to have their interpretation. See if you can let go of any resistance to their being what they're interpreting. Just see them as a portion of yourself. They're not really separate from you. No one is separate from you. No one is separate from each other. I invite you to claim your power and know beyond any doubt, beyond any hesitation, to the extent you're willing and able, that in this activity, in this moment, what we're doing is healing this divine. That's what we came here for together this evening. It's our intention to heal this wound that's in the American psyche. So I invite you to claim your power and do this now. And when we do this together, there's greater power. 1 + 1 does not equal 2 in this case. 1 + 1 always equals 1. But it is magnified enormously when we do this as a group. But claim your power. Don't ask why, don't ask how, just do it. And know that there's great power that you have in your hands to bring healing and closure to this great wound in the American psyche. It's in the world, really. Quite obvious here. Nothing but the blood of Jesus. The blood of Jesus also means consciousness, the awareness of our perfect state and perfect being. This power is not a power of force. It is a power of oneness, it is a power of love. It is a power of grace. Okay, I think we'll open our eyes now. I feel very, very full. Um, very much in love with you people and with this process of the transformation of the human being. What a magnificent thing that we have a chance to play in this process. And thank you all for coming on tonight, spending some time with me.